We're going to go ahead and get started. Can I please have your attention? Welcome, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. Please find your seats. Welcome, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. Good afternoon. Welcome. I'm Melissa Diamond. I'm the Executive Director of Wellspring House, and I'm so happy that you're here. We're going to start off the program. Julie Bishop, the chair of our board, is going to kick it off, and enjoy the ride.
Wow, good afternoon, and welcome to Wellspring House's 21st annual luncheon. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you, everyone, for taking time out of your busy lives to attend the luncheon and support the important work that Wellspring does. We're truly grateful and would be unable to help so many people in need without your annual support. Also, a big shout out to all of our sponsors who are listed in the program today. Again, my name is Julie Bishop, and I have the honor of being the chair of the Board of Trustees of Wellspring House. We have an exciting and very packed program today, so I'm not going to speak for very long. We're featuring Dr. Helen Reese, who is going to talk about her work on the neuroscience of emotion and empathy, as well as have two very special tributes today, presentations from a graduate and from a volunteer. On a little side note, I just finished Dr. Reese's book, and I thoroughly recommend it. It was a fascinating read. So I'll get right to my job today, and my job is to introduce our amazing executive director, Melissa Diamond, who's already took my line and introduced herself. We are so fortunate to have Melissa leading Wellspring's fabulous staff and the work we do, and having her remarkable vision for helping those in need on the North Shore, both adults and families. Thank you, Melissa, for all you do, and thank you again for everyone for attending today. And enjoy the program.
Thank you, Julie. I'm so happy that you're here. Today's program has a number of different components. They've all been really carefully selected, and if you stick with it for their full program, you'll understand exactly where all the pieces fit. I want to take a moment to thank so many people who've made today happen and who help Wellspring to function all year long. I'm going to describe a number of different groups of people, and then at the end I will ask you to applaud. So first I want to tell you about Wellspring House's staff. They're really amazing. There are about 40 of us on the payroll altogether, and what I can tell you is people at Wellspring choose to work for Wellspring because they want to. People could do something else, but they choose to devote their time to what we do. The work is really hard, but they do it anyway, and I'm very grateful. I also want to say thank you to the development team, Lisa Robinson, Katie Mizuraka, Mary Powers, Paula Flynn, and Lisa Wheeler. It's the leanest, meanest fundraising team I've ever met. You can't imagine how much money we raise from a very small team, and it's an honor to work with them. Thank you to the Wellspring House Luncheon Committee and co-chairs of this event. There are a lot of moving parts, as you can imagine, and it's been a steady group working away all along. We have many sponsors who are featured in our program and in the lobby, so please take a look. Thank you to the staff of the Doubletree by Hilton. We've been here many years, and you help us make it function seamlessly. And finally, I want to say thank you to the Wellspring Board of Trustees. We have 20 members of our board, and they are all here today. I'm so excited. There are a number of elected officials and honorable members of our state government here today. The Honorable First Lady Lauren Baker, Representative Ann Margaret Ferrante, Senate Minority Leader Bruce Charr, Representative Brad Hill, Gloucester Mayor Safatia Romeo Taken, Gloucester City Council President Paul Lundberg, Gloucester City Councilor Ken Hecht, Gloucester School Committee member Kathy Clancy, and if I didn't name you, you too. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone who's here. Thank you to all of the folks who I just mentioned. One of the things that you'll learn today is that Wellspring is a community of people, and we need all of us to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish, and that includes you. I'm going to take a moment to honor Betsy O'Leary Abelson. You will see in your program a beautiful photo of Betsy. It's a really beautiful photo. I love it. I first met Betsy in Stork close to 4 years ago through the Brookwood School and then at Wellspring, as they both became interested in our organization's work and mission, especially Betsy. What I know about Betsy is that when she was with me, she was there 100%. I had her full attention. She was bright, she would listen, I would ask a question, she would pause. In the most measured way, she would pull a whole host of ideas together, and then it would be done. The problem would be solved, the outcome would be envisioned, and it was time to talk about the next steps. Betsy was a co-chair of today's event. And in February, she was killed in a tragic accident. Today, I am invoking Betsy's spirit of giving, her steady commitment to each and every person around her. Later in the program, Stuart and I will be talking more about how we all can live in the path of Betsy's spirit. Until then, please let yourself be moved and pulled into today's program. I promise it will be worth it. Before we move on to the rest of your meal and coffee and things like that, I want to tell you a little bit about what Wellspring is up to and why. So Wellspring was founded in 1981 in response to the emerging crisis of family homelessness. The founders literally purchased a property, renovated a home that they lived in, and welcomed people in off the street. And for the first number of years, the primary goal was to make sure people had a welcoming, healthy, safe place to live, to gather themselves and move on with their lives. In the very beginning of my career, I also worked in the shelter system. I worked in the domestic violence shelter system, and I can tell you this was in the early 90s. And at that time, it was possible to find an apartment in 2 months. Our policy at the time was 8 weeks. And that is no longer possible. With housing costs escalating as much as they have, with the cost of living in general, including housing, escalating as it has, with the fact that earning a minimum wage, you really can't pay rent, housing is a whole nother picture today. So Wellspring has had to shift gears. Our goal is always to respond to the most critical needs in the community. We still operate a family shelter as we have since 1981, and we have a whole team devoted to homelessness prevention. But it would be frankly just irresponsible if we didn't help people earn more money to live a good life. So we have had to steer our boat towards that mission very purposefully. So everything we're about is helping people earn a living wage, which means going to work just like we all do, getting a paycheck and being able to pay your bills, buy a birthday present for your child, maybe do something nice, and not be constantly stressed about where the next paycheck is coming from. We all know what science tells us is that chronic stress is one of the best predictors of disease and early death. I mean, so this is for real, right? That's what we're about. So what you're going to hear today is about people who've come into contact with us, who've intersected with us to help us achieve our mission of people coming to Wellspring to achieve financial stability. And they're doing that with career counseling, education courses that we run, job training programs, homelessness prevention, and a lot of care. And with that, people succeed. Enjoy your meal, and I'll be back up in a little while. Thanks. Can I have your attention, please? Can I have your attention, please? Can't say good afternoon.
We would like your attention. Oh, that's it.
Good. Can I have your attention, please? So we thought we would just, for kicks, try to keep the program going during lunch, which we've never done before. Thank you for participating. We want to make sure that we're timely, that you can listen and pay attention and still pick up your kids at school. So that's the reason for this. So keep on eating and enjoying your meal. I am so honored to introduce you to Frank Robinson. He's going to tell you a little bit about himself. But Frank has been a volunteer and connected to Wellspring for many, many years. And he and his late husband are responsible for the Bob Rogers Education Opportunity Fund, which provides grants to students who are working on their career path, about 15 students each year. And the grants are not for tuition, because you can get a scholarship for tuition. The grants are for things like transportation to and from school, books, whatever that thing is that's standing in the way of someone working on their next degree or certificate or marker. What you need to know about Frank is that he's very humble, and when we talked about what he would say, he decided that he didn't want to speak about himself at all. And I had to remind Frank that today actually was about him, and he would need to start his remarks about the part of the story where he entered the story. So we'll see if he does that. But I consider Frank a dear, dear friend. You might want to know that yesterday when I stopped at his house to talk about this afternoon, he asked me if I wanted something to drink, and I actually said, "Would you make me a snack? I haven't even eaten yet today." And I don't normally do that. And I only did that because we know each other well, and I also know he makes great snacks, which he did. He made me his favorite sandwich. So that tells you a little bit about what it's like to know Frank and have Frank connected to our organization. Frank would be the first to tell you that he does not want any more stuff in his life. So rather than a plaque or something large, we are giving you a gift of an experience, a meal. If you choose to have any of us involved in the meal, we will join you, and if you don't, that's fine too.
Oh, that's how I could get away with it now without.
Frank, thank you for everything you're doing for Wellspring now, everything you've been doing for Wellspring for years, and I really, really am grateful to know you.
Thank you. I have to see what the gift is before I go further. A pig in a poke is not my interest. If I can open this stupid thing. Would you open that? Thank you, dear. This is Newport Hotel, which is actually one of my favorite places in town. And I still don't know. Oh, yes, I do. It's a gift certificate, and I will use it. And I'll invite you. What the hell? We may assume a lobster dinner. Okay. Now, first, before I get into what I'm going to get into, I want to do a little house cleaning here. If you've looked at your program, you notice Lisa Robinson has been mentioned a couple of times as being deeply involved in Wellspring. That might lead you to think that Lisa and I are involved in some way. Family involvement, I'm saying. And that's not true. And I want to just clear the air. There's no nepotism involved at all. Lisa got her name through marriage, and I got mine through adoption. So there's absolutely nothing between us that's going on. No nepotism at all. Now that we've cleared the air on that, I will get into what I'm really here for. And it's really nice because Melissa gave me a cheat sheet so that I wouldn't forget what I was supposed to say. And the first item is to say, explain how you were first involved in Introduction to Wellspring. My partner, and finally husband, Bob Rogers, went to Wellspring 8 decades ago to take some art lessons. He thought he might be an artist. We were both retired at the time. And he decided very quickly that was not in the bag. It's not going to happen, not in the bag. But he got involved in Wellspring in typical Rogers fashion. He seeked out the director and started asking all kinds of questions. He came back to the house and he said, you know, there's this outfit I've been involved in. It's really terrific. You ought to go see them. And I'm going, why would I go see them? That's your thing, not mine. He said, come along, you know, you love it. They're really nice people. So, of course, they dragged me along, and I did. And I did love it. I loved the operation. I loved the program. I loved the intent. And I absolutely adored the people. It was really nice. So I didn't get actually physically involved because Bob was someone you just simply followed in their wake. And it worked out pretty well for a while. But then he asked Nancy Swoyer, one of the co-inventors of Wellspring, what they did for fundraising. And she said very proudly, well, last year we had a golf day. And he said, okay, what did you make on the golf day? And she said, $30,000, very proudly. And Bob said, that is pathetic. And she was a bit taken back by that. And if you know Nancy, you can understand that. But anyway, he said, if you will allow me to do a fundraiser for you, I will guarantee $100,000. And she looked at him and she said, in Gloucester? She said, forget it. Ain't going to happen. Bob said, no, just let me do my thing, and I guarantee you'll get $100,000. So she said, fine. Bob did. And he got the $100,000 for the organization. And he said, now I'd like to do it a couple more times for you. He said, every other year for a couple of years, I'll do another event. And he said, we'll do $100,000 each time. Well, it didn't happen to turn out that way. But it was close to $250,000 all told. On that basis, he became a member of the board. They're not stupid. And then Nancy found a need that wasn't being fulfilled. And she said to Bob, she said, we'd like to create a new operation here, and we're going to name it for you, the Robert Clark Rogers Educational Opportunity Fund. And as Melissa indicated, it covered expenses that scholarships didn't cover. And she said, your name is on it because I know if it is, you will make it successful. And he did. Started with $30,000. The fund is now worth $250,000. And we have been able to help slightly under 100 people with all the expenses that they incur in going to school that aren't covered by scholarships. And it is a fund that is basically a donation from Wellspring to the individual. It's a grant. Nothing is expected of them in return. They don't have to return the money. They don't have to do anything for it. It's just on a basis of need. And it has been a pleasure to be involved in that because Nancy went to Bob and said, look, it would be really nice if you got involved, we got Frank involved, because you have a tendency to want to give the money away willy-nilly. And Frank might be a stabilizing balance for that. And I'm thinking, me? That isn't probably going to work very well. But anyway, I got not on the board because I refuse to be on any board. But I did help with the operation of interviewing and making decisions for where the money might go. And putting a damper on Bob. We refer to it as being the money's chaperone. Because he wanted, he really was he was at one time a sailor during the Second World War in the Navy submarine corps, and when he was, I have to stop. 5 minutes is up. Okay, I didn't realize it was going to go that quickly. Wow! Thank God. I love term limits and time limits.
So the reason why we have to stop, and you'll understand the transition in a minute, is that what's supposed to happen next is you need to meet Samara Assad, who is the recipient of the Bob Rogers Education Opportunity Fund. So you need to come to Frank's house to have a snack with me, and then you'll hear the rest of this story. But we're going to talk to Samara. So thank you so much, and stay tuned.
That was so easy. When you have a gifted gab, time goes by fast.
All right, don't go anywhere. Don't go anywhere. Thank you, Frank. You can get me later about that. I'm so pleased to introduce you to Samara Assad. Samara is a resident of Gloucester. She's a mom to a 12-year-old son. And Samara is a Wellspring graduate, among a graduate from other places as well. And Samara first started to work with Wellspring in 2007 in our Adult Learning Initiative, which is an adult education program coursework. And I'm going to let you hear from her about what happened after that. Okay. Samara, so we're going to do this in a way that's going to be like a little mock interview. Obviously, we've rehearsed, but
interview.
So bear with me. Come over here.
Okay.
So Samara, you were last here on this stage in 2012.
Yes.
So I don't know if people might remember, but there are definitely folks in the room who come to the luncheon year after year after year after year. So at that time, you were currently in school at North Shore Community College.
Yes, I was not sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So Samara has done a lot since then, but I want you to hear a little bit about when she first started at Wellspring, because all of these pieces that you're hearing about today help to paint the picture of the personality of our organization, and that's important. It's an important part of how we do what we do. So tell me about how you first came to Wellspring, and who was it that you worked with?
The first, I went to the hospital, Addison Gilbert Hospital in Gloucester, and when I was in the waiting area, I saw a fly from Wellspring House offering ESL classes. Then I told my mom, because my mom was both me, I said, Mom, maybe we should take ESL classes, both of us. That would be good. Then I wrote down the number, and after a couple of days later, I called the Wellspring.
And who was it who you met there?
Susan. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the first person that I get in contact, from the Wellspring House was Susan, and I call her, and then she's answers the phone, and it was very hard for me to speak, How's everyone can see, I still, working on my English. So then I have a hard time to explain to her that I'm just looking for ESL class. And then she said, we should come over, then we can talk. I said, okay, sure. Then I came over, and then she's explained to me, we have ESL class, but we have this other program here, LI program. I said, yeah, but I'm looking just for the ESL class. She said, no, but we have this too. I said, okay. I guess, I should look for that one too. And then she's explained to me, and she's like, you know, this one, you prepare you to go to college. I said, oh, I don't have time for that, I have to clean houses. I used to clean houses with my mom. I don't have time for that, I'm sorry. I just have to learn a little bit English so I can get more clients. And she's like, no, you're so young. You should go to college. I'm like, I'm young, but I had to work too, and then she's like, okay, so thinking about it, and okay, this thinking about it would take like a month, but every other day, this lady called me. I'm like, okay. I don't know what's going on with me, with her, just keeping calling me. I'm like, okay, I guess, So you know what? I can't do it today, Susan, because I have to help my mom, clean houses. And I know, but you should come and talk to me, I'm going to explain a little bit more to you, maybe you misunderstood anything because you know English. And I say, okay, let me talk to my mom. Then I say, Mom, this lady keeps on calling me like almost every day. She doesn't give up on me, I don't know why, so I guess I should come. And my mom, yeah, maybe we should go back there. Then I went back there, and she's explaining it again. And I say, I understood. And I'm like, okay. Finally, I'm like, okay, I think I should do it, She's so persistent, I should do it, Then I did it. I enrolled in the LI program, and I did for 17 weeks, which was, was beautiful, was amazing. It was a great time, all the classmates and teachers so compassionate with me, especially because I only say hi and nothing else, So I'm like, okay, that'll be fun, So they learn Portuguese, At the end of the 17 weeks, of course, they learn a lot of words of Portuguese because, to communicate with me, But yeah, I survived. It was good.
All right. That's your first clue on how we get people to feel confident to start.
Yeah.
So that was in 2007. And the next step that Samara needed to take is she needed to pass the GED. And she did that at Beverly Bootstraps. And once she had done that, then Samara was able to take the next step, which was to go to North Shore Community College. And she earned her associates in liberal arts in 2012.
Thank you.
And the next step after that was to go to Salem State, and she earned her bachelor's in international business and chemistry in 2015. So what's important to say, and I'm going to keep making this point today, is that Wellspring's community is everyone in this room and more. So Samara and her mom were at the hospital because they needed health insurance, and they were meeting with Safatia to get health insurance, right?
Yes.
And Samara needed to get her GED, and she went to Bootstraps to get her GED. We helped with a piece. We helped her map her plan. She had to go to get further education. She did that at North Shore Community College in Salem State. But the thread, and this is who we are, the thread is Wellspring. That's where we come in. We're the core that helps people get going and going and going. So one of the things that Samara and I have talked about is that just having a degree is not necessarily enough. You can be bright, smart, talented, raising a child, but it doesn't mean necessarily you're going to get a job. And we'll keep talking about that. Why would it be that I graduated from college in 1993 and I had a job in 3 months? I lived with my sister. I had parents who helped me. I spoke only one language. So obviously we all know that if you speak more than one language, your brain is firing in all kinds of different ways. I only spoke one at the time, but I had no trouble finding a job. So that's part of what Wellspring is about, to try to create the opportunities for people who really need them and should have them. Okay, so 2015 to now, Samara's been raising her son, working as a language interpreter. When you were talking about that at Beth Israel Leahy now, but Leahy at the time, and driving Uber. And so Samara is working now in a new job, and we're going to talk just a little bit about how that happened.
Yes. So I graduated in 2015, and after I finished school, my mom went back to Brazil, and I don't have family at all. So nobody, just I and my son. So I have nobody to help me take care of my son, and to get a full-time job, and on top of that, it was hard to, and I have no networking, because I'm originally from Brazil. So I know my cousin, they know someone, I don't know anyone. So that was very hard for me to get a job. And then I started drive Uber because it was matched with my son's, schedule, and do interpreter too, as a boarding, job as a translator at the hospital. And one of those days I was, not planning to drive, but it was not usually my regular day to drive, and I decided to drive that day. And I have this call. And I accepted this passenger. And I went there to get this passenger, and this was a guy. And I usually don't talk to guys. And I'm sorry for the guys here, but I don't. So then this guy, came, got in the car. Hi, say hi. And he's like, I'm kind of running late. I'm like, okay, I'm so sorry. So it's okay. Okay. Then we start the ride. And he wants to talk. I'm like, okay, I don't talk to guys, I'm sorry. And he's like, what's your name? I said, Samara. Oh, okay. Where are you from? I think he got my accent, quick. Like, where are you from? Brazil. Oh, so where you live? I said, in Gloucester. And he said, oh, is a Wellspring house in Gloucester? Yeah, I say, yes, it's a Wellspring house in Gloucester. I'm like, okay. I just can't, I don't want to talk to guys. And okay, it's Wellspring housing. Okay, so how long you have been here? And he's continuing asking questions. He's probably related to Susan, I guess, very persistent. I'm like, okay, maybe they know each other. I'm like, okay, let's talk. Okay, so yes, I'm Samara from Brazil. I have 2 years, I have a son, 12 years old, yeah. In the end of this, okay, I'm applying for, right now I'm doing this, but I'm applying for a job. Oh, maybe I can help you. Maybe you can work where I work. Maybe I can get a job where I work. I say, okay, sounds good. I say, maybe. Sometimes, you never know, maybe he can, or maybe, we never know. So I say, okay, and then he's like, give me his email. He's actually saying, okay, I'm going to send my email to you, and then you can send me you can forward me your resume. I'm like, okay, sounds good to me. And then we exchange numbers and email. And I think it was a couple of days later, I sent my email, I sent the email out with my resume, and then he answered me in a second. I'm like, whoa, this guy really wants to help me, I guess, second. And then so then he told me, oh, I'll pass along your resume to the right people, and they will contact you at the end of the day tomorrow. I'm like, okay, sounds good. And actually, I forgot about something. Before he, exchanged, emails, he asked me then he told me, I told him, oh, I have a degree, just to let him know that I, if he have anything to offer me, that I have a degree. And then I told him, oh, and by the way, too, I'm a Wellspring House alumni. Oh, done deal. I got a job. I'm like, oh, yeah, he'll make crazy. I don't know why he's saying that. I don't know, I have no clue about this, who this guy is, So I'm like, okay, so done deal, okay, I guess I get a job. I have a job. So then after we exchange emails, and then I send it, and then someone from the HR from this company contacted me, and they got me a job.
Great.
Yeah.
And just so people know, what kind of company is it?
It's a CRO company, so it's a clinical research organization.
And what are you doing?
I'm a part of the clinical trial team, doing clinicals, going different sites.
Good.
Yeah.
So Samara is working per diem at a clinical research organization, and we'll see what happens next, right? So mom speaks 2 languages, has 2 degrees, working at this organization, and stay tuned for the rest of the story.
Thank you.
So I'm very honored to introduce you to Michelle Harrison. Many people probably know Michelle. She's a career-long attorney from Gloucester. I have watched Michelle at many city council meetings with admiration. If you need to get something done, you need to find out from Michelle how to get it done. But what you don't know is that many years ago, I call it the prehistoric era because it's before I was a mother, which didn't even really happen, I don't think. But in the prehistoric era, Michelle and I used to meet with a whole group of people every morning on Glen Harbor Beach at 6, and we were somewhat tortured by Rick Muth, who's the ROTC lead at the high school. And this group of adults who just wanted to get in shape thought it would be a good idea to try a boot camp, which was a real boot camp. And that's what we did. We met each other in T-shirts with sand all over each other. And now, all of these years later, Michelle has become semi-retired, became an ESOL teacher, and is reconnected at Wellspring. And we're all dressed up now. So thank you for your work, and I'm going to let you talk about your work with Wellspring.
Thank you, Melissa. Good afternoon. I'm honored to be here to represent the many Wellspring volunteers in sharing the pleasure, the reward, the joy, and the poignant moments that we all have in our relationship with the Wellspring participants. Too often, I lament during the evening news or when reading the morning newspaper of the powerlessness that we all feel when hearing of the tragic, abusive instances of domestic, sexist, racist, anti-Semitic behavior, the detained children along our southern border, or the starving children in Yemen. What can I do? What action can I take to lessen the effects of the tragedies in someone's life? What can I do to reduce the divisiveness that exists in our country? Here's the answer: become a Wellspring volunteer. It's easy, it's rewarding, it's challenging, it's important, it makes a difference, and you're going to feel the reward again and again. I'm not asking you to step in front of the tanks rolling into Tiananmen Square in China, as that brave man did in 1989, who risked his life but stopped a government crackdown. Nor must we rise to the ideal exemplified by Malala Yousafzai as she continued her fight for the education of women and girls after being shot by the Taliban, for advocating that right for education. I'm asking you instead to mentor a family, an individual, assist with career and education programs, work to provide a welcome for new immigrants and refugees, staff the holiday gift program, or as I have done, become a tutor or teacher of English. Sadly, I am of a generation and personality where I don't think I'm qualified to do anything unless I go back to school and get some kind of a degree or certificate. But that's certainly not necessary. And when you have directors of your chosen volunteer program as talented and as giving as Melissa Buchanan and Peggy Duff, you will never feel like you've just been thrown into the swimming pool without a life ring in sight. Melissa and Peggy are there to support the volunteers in the ESOL program, whether it's through providing materials, training, encouragement, or good humor. Melissa's over there, I think. Give us a hello. Let me share a few of my experiences teaching English, both amusing and poignant. 2 families from the Middle East arrived in Gloucester in the fall of 2016, friendless, with limited or no English, but fleeing tragedy and injustice. 1 family from Syria and 1 from Afghanistan. They arrived into the arms of 2 wonderful women, Peggy Russell and Susan Aroney, who are here, and I'd like to acknowledge them too. With others, but led by Susan and Peggy, with others, but led by these two women, apartments were found and furnished, fundraising was done, and Melissa Buchanan called me to see if I would teach the English to the two families. A refugee settlement agency required that they study in a program with a certified ESOL teacher. That certificate I went back to school for came in handy. Melissa told the resettlement agency that the students didn't have to go to Lynn for language classes. Wellspring can provide the instruction, and a new chapter began. After a few weeks, when the classmates were feeling comfortable, Susan Aroney and I were doing our best modeling dialogues and providing the necessary family for the students to learn family relationships. Father, mother, sister, son, daughter. But I noticed a student weeping. I later learned that she had to leave a son in Turkey and a daughter in Syria. I know no Arabic, she knew no English, and I questioned, what mistake had I made in raising family relationships without knowing family circumstances? How can I console her? A strong, supportive embrace was the best that I could do, and it created a loving relationship that she and I continue to share. Siham, will you stand up and say hello? A few weeks later, my class of 5 had great proficiency in introducing themselves. Where are you from? What language do you speak? Where do you live? One afternoon, the then president of the Wellspring Board of Directors, Caroline Hovey, came to visit my class, and my students proudly introduced themselves with a nice pronunciation and correct English. I asked if they had any questions for Caroline. A young man, proud of his new proficiency in speaking and understanding English, raised his hand and proudly asked Caroline, "How old are you?" Oh dear. I was very proud of my student for being comfortable and proficient in asking a question, but I didn't think he'd start with one quite that personal. Caroline, typically gracious, gasped, blushed, and answered his question. My life as a volunteer at Wellspring is full of these vignettes. I have done just a little bit in making my students' adjustment to life in the United States, specifically in Gloucester, more friendly, more comfortable, a place they can call home. Join me. Now don't say no, not me. I believe that the outstanding majority of us here already are volunteers, maybe not at Wellspring, but through organizations or groups reflecting our own individual interests. It is that feeling of knowing that, yes, I can make a difference. As a volunteer in the ESOL program, I receive much more than I give. Wellspring offers so many opportunities to share our time, talents, and to make a difference in someone's life. We look to see how we may be able to help. We donate our time and/or our resources when we can. We extend ourselves to make room for others. We welcome them, and they accept us. We actively seek the well-being of others, knowing how it might make this world just a little bit more loving. Your hearts are big, the need is unending, the commitment is doable, and the reward is greater than I can express. Thank you.
I am thrilled to introduce you to Dr. Helen Reese. Dr. Reese is a clinical psychiatrist and associate professor of psychiatry at Harvard Medical School. She directs the Empathy Research Program at Massachusetts General Hospital. She has devoted her career to the art and science, teaching, and research of the physician-patient relationship, teaching medical students, residents, and faculty. Her TEDx, The Power of Empathy, has received 440,000 views, including educators, health professionals, and business leaders and leadership consultants. Dr. Reese is a core member of the Consortium for Research on Emotional Intelligence in Organizations, founded by Daniel Goleman. Dr. Reese's research led to the development of empathy training that has trained thousands of doctors and nurses, which led her to co-founding Empathetics, Inc., a company that provides empathy training through online and blended learning solutions. She is the author of a newly released book, The Empathy Effect: 7 Neuroscience Keys for Transforming the Way We Live, Work, Love, and Connect Across Differences. And the book is available with a signature after this program. The book, The Empathy Effect, is about expanding empathy for a broad audience, including parents, educators, business leaders, politicians, leadership, and those involved in the arts. It's for everyone. So I introduce you to Dr. Helen Reese.
Thank you, Melissa, for that really warm and lovely introduction. I also want to thank the entire Wellspring staff that's created this fantastic opportunity for us all to come together, and also for the public servants that are in our midst that work on such a broad level to make all of these efforts that we're engaged in a reality. I'm going to start with a Chinese proverb that speaks to the link between empathy and happiness. If you want happiness for an hour, take a nap. If you want happiness for a day, go fishing. If you want happiness for a month, get married. If you want happiness for a year, earn or inherit a lot of money. And if you want happiness for a lifetime, help others. Empathy is embedded in the secret of happiness because we are all connected on a neurobiological level far more than we have previously realized. Consciously or not, we are connected in constant natural resonance with one another's feelings. When we're engaged in shared mind intelligence, which is the power boost to our knowledge of others when we come together with intention, the possibilities for mutual aid and collaborative problem solving are all around us. As we've just heard from this remarkable story, we shift from unconscious to conscious opportunities to connect, and that's when the miraculous starts to happen. So what exactly is this thing called empathy? Empathy is not a soft and squishy feeling. It is hardwired into the human brain. It can be expanded, and it can also be blunted. Empathy has both emotional and cognitive components. And so empathy is not just one thing. It's better understood as a capacity to perceive the thoughts and feelings of others, to process them, and that typically motivates a response. Empathy has survived over the millennia because it makes acts of helping others internally rewarding. And then we humans are primed to help more. Evolutionary biologists say that empathy has made human survival possible because it promotes collaboration, cooperation, and reciprocity. As a psychiatrist, I got involved in empathy research about 15 years ago because I was hearing from way too many patients that their doctors were not empathizing with them and that they were feeling unseen, unheard, and they were feeling as if no one really cared. This was causing patients to lose motivation to make really important changes in their lives, such as stopping smoking, losing weight, or taking their medications. Increased focus on technology, less time with patients, and typing data into computers rather than connecting was robbing patients and their doctors of meaningful connections. And patients' health was suffering, and meanwhile, physician burnout has been skyrocketing. By studying the neuroscience of empathy, I learned that if we are paying attention, other people's feelings are actually mapped onto our own brains. Some really elegant neuroimaging studies showed that areas of the brain that were active when people were experiencing painful electric shocks to their hands were also active just when they were observing other people receiving similar shocks. This showed that when we say, "I feel your pain," it is not just a figure of speech. When we watch a child fall off a bike and scrape his knee and start crying, our pain and emotion centers light up, and that motivates us to help. We all possess these specialized neurons called mirror neurons and other shared neural circuits that help us to feel with others. And that motivates us to lend a helping hand, give the child a hug, and clean up the bruised knee. I also learned that the neuropeptide oxytocin, the bonding hormone that's released when mothers and infants gaze at one another, is also active when caring health professionals look you in the eye or when any person sincerely shows caring for you. So making eye contact and listening attentively is part of the art of healing. We discovered how powerful the effects of deep listening, tone of voice, and recognizing our own feelings as a mirror of others' feelings were to how we connect. Based on all these findings, I developed empathy training, a targeted approach to opening the eyes and ears of doctors and nurses to be fully present with their patients, to look for the vulnerable person behind even the most difficult and off-putting tactics, to see who was really there. Most often, it was a very frightened and powerless feeling person, and to learn about their story. We taught how to deliver bad news with empathy and compassion. We showed how people respond to each other physiologically so that they learned how to regulate their emotions with some mindfulness techniques. And importantly, we showed that it does not take 10 or even 5 extra minutes to sit at eye level, to listen attentively, and to be fully present. And this could change the whole dynamic of an interaction without taking much more time. Many doctors will say today that they don't have time for empathy anymore because everything is so rushed. And I just challenge that we all have time for empathy. We may not have 15 minutes to listen to a lengthy story, but we certainly have the time to sit, meet a person, and understand where they're coming from. Our training that we developed was then tested in a randomized controlled trial at Mass General Hospital. This is the gold standard for proving that something works. And unfortunately, in medicine, you need such studies to sometimes demonstrate the obvious. So we showed that our training significantly improved patients' ratings of their doctor's empathy. This was considered a groundbreaking study because it was the first study to show that empathy could be taught. Far from the belief that you're either born with it or you're not, we showed that it can be both learned and also sustained. This finding was reported in the New York Times, and after that, the demand for our training in healthcare, business, and education became so intense that it led to putting the training online and my co-founding Empathetics. So this could be implemented throughout large organizations. Now, many people ask, what is the difference between empathy and sympathy? Isn't sympathy enough? Empathy is quite different from sympathy. Sympathy is feeling sorry for others and even taking pity on them, but not necessarily being moved to do anything about it. Empathy, on the other hand, is our capacity to feel with others, both through shared emotions and by seeing the world through their eyes, by engaging our curiosity and getting others' perspectives. Empathy allows us to connect with others not just by standing in their shoes, but by taking a walk with them. As we learn more about what other people are facing, our empathy gets activated and we are motivated to help. One of the most interesting findings is that empathy is also intrinsically rewarding because both the receiver and the giver, as we just heard from the speaker before me, are rewarded. Their areas of the brain in an area called the nucleus accumbens is activated when you receive empathy and also when you give it. This area of the brain is also activated by opioids and alcohol. And so we understand that those drugs are so compelling once this part of the brain is active, but we also know that people can get really hooked on helping. And what a healthier way there is to expand your nucleus accumbens through service than the alternatives. So it's a powerful part of the brain that seeks repetition of that rewarding feeling. Compassion is our outward expression that we have been moved to care about another person. And the way that caring is shown is known as compassion. It can be as simple as a caring look, a touch of the hand, or driving someone where they need to go. Compassion has many faces and many flavors, and sometimes you just feel it when you're before someone who truly cares about you. One example of how empathy works was when I was teaching medical trainees, and one of them told me how she would get so annoyed when patients in a busy emergency room would spend the first 5 minutes loudly complaining and even yelling about how long they had to wait in the waiting room to be seen, how much pain they were in, and how frustrated they were. Anybody ever been there? So she would get quite impatient and say, "I'm doing the best I can. Well, now that you're here, what is the problem?" And then she would get right to fixing it. She caught their frustration and became frustrated herself. After 11 p.m., she was the only physician in this specialty emergency room. No wonder everyone has to wait, she thought. I asked her to describe some of the emergencies that she took care of. One was taking a sharp, tiny drill bit out of someone's eye. I see some of you have just cringed, even though nothing has touched you. So this shared feeling that you just had is how empathy works. So something has touched your pain and disgust centers so that you actually groaned. And isn't that amazing that we have this feeling for a person, this happened like many years ago, whom we've never met, but we have this feeling of, oh, I feel with you. So that is empathy. You feel it just by hearing about someone in pain, and you wince because your pain center just lit up. When I asked this trainee to imagine what it was like to sit in a waiting room for 4 hours with a sharp object in her eye, her demeanor suddenly changed. This technique is called perspective taking. And it works, but sometimes we're so busy we don't stop to think about what it's like on the other side of the equation. So she imagined how scary it would be to have this piece of metal land in her eye and then to sit with that pain and fear for hours while others' names were called into the ER bays behind the closed double doors. She became visibly upset and chided herself for how she'd behaved in the past. Her ability to feel the patient's pain rather than dismissing it and her shift in perspective led her to start opening conversations with, "I'm so sorry you had to wait so long. I'm the only doctor on duty here tonight, and I'm so sorry you've been uncomfortable out in the waiting room. Instead of hearing complaints, the first patient she tried this with said, "Oh, you poor thing, this must be so hard on you." By showing empathy, the patient's appreciation came back to her and made her feel cared about too. When she reported this, everyone in the class understood the power of a few caring words to change a distressing situation. Incidentally, the last chapter of my book is called Self-Empathy. And one way to ensure that we have enough empathy to go around is to be sure that we practice enough self-care to fill our own tanks. We cannot run on empty, and anyone who thinks that they can keep on giving without replenishing their own resources is really headed for burnout. And this has been a trend in medical education that I'm happy to say is starting to turn around. So one way to be sure we have enough empathy to go around is to find what invigorates us, what gives us rest, what gives us relaxation, so that we don't become blunted the same way the medical trainee had become. So you've just experienced a little bit about how empathy works. We feel the pain of others through shared neural circuits, and we use our own lived experiences to imagine the experiences of others. And when we feel and understand another person's pain and respond with caring, the empathy loop comes back to make us feel good as well. This is the empathy effect. So for whom do we feel the most empathy? Well, it turns out that there are 3 categories. The first is people who are the most like us. The second is those who have suffered like us. And the third is those with whom we share common goals. This is where our natural-born empathy can sometimes lead to trouble if we remain too insulated from the world of people who suffer. Psychologists call our preference for those who are similar to us in-group bias. Human beings are still quite tribal in nature. And this is why we feel the greatest empathy for those who share similar interests, hobbies, social circles, faiths, and geography. The in-group legacy becomes a problem when it limits our capacity to experience empathy for those who don't match up to any shared characteristics, and this becomes the so-called out-group. What happens when we close our eyes to people who are struggling, who are not like us? Do we turn the other way because they don't tug at our heartstrings? Is it because we don't know what to do, or we feel helpless, or we fear that the little that we can do won't make much of a difference? Homeless people, for example, generally fall into the out-group category for most of us because we tend to other homeless people and perceive them as so vastly apart from society that they cease to evoke emotional responses to their suffering. Interestingly, however, more than 35% of New Yorkers surveyed by the polling agency Public Agenda fear becoming homeless themselves, and a startling 30% have had a loved one on the streets. So exactly how far away from being homeless do we actually really believe we are? Perhaps homelessness is something we can identify with, and maybe that is part of why it is so frightening. When questioned, a survey found that more than 70% of New Yorkers feel that as long as homelessness exists, we are not living up to our values as a country. Another group that's easy to empathize with is people who have suffered like us. We find that common experiences of suffering bind people together who have almost nothing else in common. This is why support groups for people who have lost loved ones, for people who are healing from illnesses, facing cancer, have family members with chronic conditions or disabilities, why these groups are so effective. The third group is people with whom we share a common goal. This is the third leg of empathy, of the empathy stool, and we are seeing that in practice as we sit here together today. Common goals can be as commonplace as rooting for the same sports team. Let's face it, we do have more empathy when a Red Sox player gets injured than when it happens to a New York Yankee. But after the Boston Marathon bombing, we saw how empathy rises to higher levels of connection. The Yankees sang Sweet Caroline at their first home game after Boston's most famous sport event was attacked by terrorists. So the common bond of athletes superseded the ancient rivalry between the two teams, at least temporarily. What are other examples of common goals that bind empathy? One of the ways our shared humanity is expressed is when we come together to solve what appear to be insurmountable problems. When we embrace a common goal, we see transformations that could not have been imagined in common hours. Wellspring House gives us the opportunity to come together to help solve one of the world's most vexing problems, homelessness, through homelessness prevention. Sometimes the line that separates us from homelessness is very thin indeed, and one of the biggest advantages is an education that prepares you for work where you can earn a living wage. In northeastern Massachusetts, housing is so expensive that we realize that people really need more than a high school education, or they fall into the risk of the demographic for homelessness. If you're earning $11 an hour and one thing goes wrong, an injury, a broken car, a spouse leaves you, or you can't pay the rent, you may find yourself with few other options. Some years ago, a friend emailed a group of our friends with the subject line, "Night Out in Waltham." There are many restaurants in Waltham, so we all assumed it was an invitation to meet for dinner. It was. However, the location was a soup kitchen. We were invited to bring our young families and a dish for an evening dinner with homeless people. There, my daughter Claire, who's here today, talked to the guests and learned that some of the homeless guests couldn't get jobs because they didn't have cell phones to contact employers or to receive any phone calls back. At the dinner, she realized the homeless people were ordinary, regular people. Not people who belonged to another tribe, but people who had fallen on hard times combined with incredible bad luck and no resources to fill the gap. This one activity humanized the homeless people for her. She visited a community day center where some of these homeless people spent the day, and she asked what would it cost to install some phone lines. It wasn't that much, but it was more than she had in her little savings account. So as a high school community service project, she organized a fund drive by writing a letter explaining she was collecting money for phone lines. She raised enough money to install 3 landlines at the community day center, and other funds were raised to pay for the monthly charges. I will never forget the look of excitement on Claire's face when she walked into that place and saw the guests talking on the phone. This is the empathy loop in action. Stand up. We get an incredibly good feeling when our efforts of simply talking to people or making donations of time or money make a huge difference in how other people live. We live in an age and some communities where many of our youth are completely insulated from people who have few or no resources for basic living. Some young people's sense of deprivation stems from not having the latest version of the iPhone. When they learn to compare what they have only with those who have more, they can feel deprived even when they live in a sea of riches. Learning that people couldn't get jobs if they had no phone at all can create quite a shift in that perspective. In the last 2.5 years, my own personal experience with homelessness has changed dramatically. We moved out of a suburb west of Boston where I never saw a homeless person on the streets to the heart of the city. Homelessness was kind of an abstraction for me that I equated with walking the streets of New York City. Now that I walk to Mass General Hospital, I pass dozens of homeless people on the street every day. I'm somewhat ashamed to say that at first I felt some fear when I passed some of the people who were quite direct about needing money. I'd awkwardly reach into my purse and put money in the cup and then quickly move on. But my curiosity about some of the people grew as I passed them day after day. One day, I asked a woman what her name was. She said, "I'm Katie." I said, "Hi, Katie, I'm Helen." And I said, would it be okay if I came and asked you at some time about why you're homeless?" She said, "Sure, anytime." So about a week later, I learned as being a psychiatrist that you don't go right for the question like the first time you say hello. So about a week later, I asked her about her story, and here's what she told me. "I have bipolar disease, and for years, I refused treatment. I have 3 kids, and I was living with my parents, and I was horrible to them. One day they told me, 'Katie, we will take care of your kids, but you have to leave. We can't deal with your behavior anymore.' They basically kicked me out. And you know, they were right to do it. I didn't deserve to live with them because of how I acted. Now I'm on medication and my bipolar illness is under control. I'm on a list for subsidized housing and it could take up to 6 months. I think it is one step at a time until I can take some courses, get a good job, so I can be with my kids again." I was floored. Katie's story was full of humanity and hope. I could see that a light had been kindled in her. Every one of us has a light. We just need to choose which window to let our lights shine through. It may be a window of service, of funding. It may be a commitment to volunteering. It may be using some of the skills that you have that are aching to be expressed, but you haven't figured out where. It could be any number of experiences that you have had that could find a connection to helping people in need, people who just haven't had the same number of chances that you have had. We know from neuroscience that we are wired to connect and wired to help. When we make an ongoing commitment to help others in whatever way we can, we enrich not just that person, but the entire fabric of humanity. Thank you for your attention.
Helen, thank you so much. I would like to introduce you to Stuart Abelson, who is the president and CEO of Aura, the world leader in ophthalmology drug and device development. Aura is headquartered in Andover, Massachusetts, and supports innovation and research in eye care across the United States, Europe, Japan, China, and Australia. Stuart currently serves as trustee at the Brookwood School, Massachusetts Eye and Ear Infirmary, and the Chicago Zoological Society, and is trustee emeritus at Bates College. Stuart holds an MBA from the Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern University, and a Bachelor's of Science in Neuroscience from Bates College. Stuart.
Wow, there are a lot of people here. Thanks, Melissa, for that wonderful introduction. The only thing I would add is that I am the eternal husband and lifetime soulmate for Betsy, and the father of this beautiful girl right here in the front row, Audrey, and her brother Sam. Listen, it's an honor and a privilege to be here today to share in the incredible energy and goodness in this room. Our being here together in this moment shows that we care deeply about helping others. We are here to learn more about Wellspring. We're here to see and feel the good work that Wellspring is doing and help to understand how we can support the good work that they're doing with our time and treasure. First of all, I want to thank you all. Since we lost Betsy on February 9th, there's been a tremendous outpouring of love and sympathy from everyone. And not just those who knew our family, but thousands of people who heard the story and empathized. Betsy was a young woman with an old soul, and she was welcomed with such warmth and authenticity into the many communities that we are involved. Everyone who heard the story hurt for Betsy, hurt for our baby Brooke, hurt for Sam and Audrey, myself. We often heard this phrase, there are no words. And there really aren't. They're only feelings. And, those feelings are so powerful that words can't really articulate. But, you've given hugs and you've held us in your thoughts and prayers and you've done acts of goodness that have honored her. When you think about someone, it really matters. You're creating a brainwave, a pattern of neural firings that somehow that energy is transmitted through the quantum plane in this universe. And it transmits, right? And we feel that love, we feel that warmth, we feel that strength. So thanks for sending all those vibes. So, accident. I'm easing back into work a couple weeks after this, and I'm meeting in my office. It's a big glass wall, and I notice a familiar face walking past the fishbowl. And our eyes make contact through the glass, and sort of have a funny feeling. So I excuse myself from the person who I'm meeting with. I say, I'll just be right back. So I slide open my door, and I go to this woman who's getting a tour from our HR representative. I say, hi, do I know you? I'm Stuart Abelson. And we have this funny connection. She says, well, yes, of course you know me. I'm Samara, your Uber driver. Well, I say, that's wonderful. Great to see you here. But I'm very confused because my guys, this is a lot gone on. But last time I heard is you came in for a job interview, and you weren't interested in the job, and so they said it wasn't going to work out. So what happened? And she tells me the most amazing thing next. She says, well, that's right. I wasn't interested in a job in a warehouse. I wanted to connect with people and be in more of a social setting. So I went onto your website. I looked at all the job postings that you had. I resubmitted my application, and here I am on my first day. How cool a story is that, right? All made possible by turning a chance meeting, into a meaningful connection. And it wasn't just my bravery in talking to Samara, but it was also her bravery in getting comfortable to talk to a guy. We're not all bad. What is chance, right? What is chance? A lightning strike, Question is, can we make it strike again? Can you make this kind of a chance thing happen again and more broadly? Yeah, I think you can. I think you can put on that metal helmet and run around with the lightning rod in the storm, and I think you can make it happen again. And here's how we're going to do it. Let's unpack this situation, right? So I'm in the back of Samara's car, and we're on our way to Boston. And I have a genuine curiosity about people. Right? I like to get to know their story. I like to ask questions. I like to know my fellow travelers on this journey of life. Right? I find joy in finding connection with them and in helping people. It's not really a conscious thing. It's like breathing for me. I just do it. So what began as simple curiosity became an important touch point for Samara to learn more about Aura and for me to effectively interview her and become comfortable recommending her to my team. See, in addition to being great for employees like Samara, it's great for business. Right? At Aura, we design and run global research programs and study innovative new therapies to treat eye disease. The most important part of my job is to create a culture of high openness and trust so that the many teams across our organization and around the world can do an outstanding work in an environment that makes purposeful forward momentum sustainable. Aura's success is built upon people who love what they do, love the people that they work with, and understand that they are together on a very important mission to help improve the human experience. We're a growing company, and with 70 open positions, we're to keep looking everywhere to connect with awesome people because the most complex problems can only be solved with diverse perspectives. Listen, Samara had the education, right, the Wellspring stabilizing experience, but lacked the network to help her to connect with meaningful employment. And that's how we can all here make a difference, right? That's how we can make lightning strike again. If each of us in the room recognizes the power that we all have to connect with each other and to serve as connectors to each other. Right? That's a very important concept. Together, we could solve lots of problems. All we need to do is take the first step by initiating that conversation, seeing that other human being, getting to know our fellow travelers, and genuinely thinking about how we can help them on their journey. If all of us in the room do that, imagine the number of Samara Stewart interactions and stories that we can create. Listen, Betsy and I are committed to continuing to do good work together. Our continued shared philanthropy helps us to stay connected, and we intertwine our creativity, our connections, and our resources with organizations that share our values. This lets her live with me and act every day in a deeply and meaningful way. It's also fun. Listen, Indian civil rights activist Mahatma Gandhi said, "The true measure of any society can be found in how it treats its most vulnerable members." That's exactly what Wellspring does. That's where it goes to work. And since 1981, they've helped thousands of families. They're executing on a winning formula. It's working. Wellspring House has everything that Betsy and I look for in an organization that we like to be involved with. A strategy that's focused on the total solution, not just one part of the problem. Measuring success based on outcomes, strong and passionate leadership, low administrative overhead, and of course, joyful, fun, and committed people. So today, we're going to take a quantum leap in our support of Wellspring with a blend of Betsy and my resources. First, I'm committed to hiring 5 Wellspring graduates, Wellspring alumni, and we're going to make sure that our job postings at Aura, right, Lexi? Yeah, there you go. Job postings at Aura are visible to those, and we're also going to go ahead and get on site and make sure that they're really accessible. Not that they're buried somewhere on a website, but we'll go and we'll have a career day and talk about those jobs and really communicate, so it makes it accessible. Second, there you go. Second, we're going to offer some on-site clinical research training. We're going to educate people about what the kind of jobs that exist in clinical research, maybe do some GCP training, which is one of the regulatory standards to get people accessible. Not just people for Aura, but also these jobs are all across Massachusetts. Life science industry is booming, and we need to have all these jobs, and there's just not enough people. So it's a shame to have people in Massachusetts that don't have those types of positions or aren't qualified. So we're going to... So we're going to employ them and we're going to train them. Those are things we can do right away and meaningfully. Third, Betsy was a doctor of physical therapy and, worked at the wonderful Harmling clinics that are all over here on the North Shore. I think there's some representatives maybe here today. I saw that there was a donation book. It probably came from Betsy asking Pete. But Betsy also worked at Spalding Rehab in Charleston, and she was loved by her patients, and she had that magical, empathetic approach that Dr. Reese described when she was encouraging stroke patients to get out of bed and start moving, or helping athletes recover from a concussion or a knee surgery. She was such a believer in the therapeutic potential of empathy that we want to help make today's Luncheon fundraiser the most successful ever and show our appreciation for all of your support. So, with the combination of her earnings and mine, we're going to go ahead and match dollar for dollar up to $50,000 the donations that are made today. But we're not going to stop there. One of the critical parts of the Wellspring success formula is the emergency financial assistance that is provided to families during their most vulnerable time. Managed strategically, these one-time grants function like a catalyst to get families on a stable and positive path. Each year, Wellspring funds this support out of their operating budget. Now, for any chemists in the room, and I know one of them, Samara, where are you? You're a chemist, right? Right? One of the key parts of a catalyst is that it accelerates the reaction, but it is not itself consumed. Right? That's a very important concept. Well, if Wellspring has to go out and raise that money every year and then they give it away, it's consumed. So the right thing to do from a philanthropy standpoint is to endow it. So Betsy and I are making a substantial leadership gift that's going to help to catalyze a $1 million campaign that's going to go ahead and endow the emergency fund. And that'll be a perpetual source of financial support and truly a catalyst for good. It's been a pleasure to be here today. Thank you for welcoming me, and I'll turn it over to the lovely and awesome Melissa Diamond, who'll wrap it up for us.
So Stuart and I have been spending a lot of time together lately, and we've been texting each other a lot. And I think he got curious about the fact that I'm steady, because not all of what he just said was known to me, but I am going to act like I knew. It's awesome. I knew about most of it. All right, so I want to turn you to the inside of your program. I hope today has been absolutely inspiring. It's been inspiring to me to spend time with you, to get to know Samara, to have a snack with Frank, to have extra time with Michelle, to get to meet Helen and hear about empathy. I'll just tell you a quick note about me and why I care about things like this. We all have empathy. I believe that it's in the best interest of the human race for us to have empathy. And I am not a neuroscientist, but I believe that it gets kicked out of us sometimes. And we have to tap back into it if we need to. So if you're looking for more of it, I suggest that you reconnect with Wellspring if you have not been connected with us lately, or connect anew with Wellspring, because it's a place where joy happens and we really need you. I was born in 1971, and I was born very early, and I was 3 pounds. And at that time, if anybody knows, that was not good. And I lived at the hospital for the first 8 weeks of my life. So why? Why did that group of people care for me? They didn't know me. I might not have been here. And then when I was 8 years old, my dad, who's a retired physician, on Christmas would take my sister and I, because we're Jewish, and we would load up stretchers with deli platters from the Parkway Deli in Silver Spring, Maryland. And we would go around to the emergency room and the ICU and deliver food to the nurses who were working on Christmas. It was really fun riding the stretcher, but it was also fun to do something good for people. So I learned that at a really early age, and I've been having a lot of fun ever since then. So I welcome you to join us. On your inside cover, you're going to see a description of what we're doing right now. Sometimes people say, what does Wellspring do? I know you're great, Wellspring's great, but what do you do? So what we do is we're very strategic about the programs that we offer so that people can get a shot at earning a living wage. It is all about that. You can't work if you don't have a place to live. You can't work if you don't have a reliable place to live. You can't think about anything else. We know that that's the way the brain works when you're just trying to survive. So we help people stabilize their housing so that they can get on with the next step. Then we give people a chance to receive education, whether it's learning English, arriving to the United States, whether it's taking a math class, a computer class, an English composition class. All of those courses earn credit at North Shore Community College. This year we just launched an English class that earns credit at Salem State University. We have a career advising program that helps people map out what they're going to do next to get to the milestone after the milestone after the milestone that's going to ultimately lead to a living wage. 15% of our employees are Wellspring graduates, and I hope it will be much more over time. In fact, I would like to be put out of a job, so stay tuned. I mean, I like my job, but it'd be good if somebody who was a Wellspring graduate assumed it someday. So on the inside cover, you'll see a UR code. If you want to use your smartphone, you can take a picture of that code. That'll take you to the Wellspring website so you can make a donation. You can write a check. You can step out at the payment table in the lobby. As you know, we have support from someone who really cares about what we do and who wants to make a difference in our communities. And if you make a gift, it will be matched. We've never had this kind of opportunity before, and I sincerely hope you will help us get there. We are aided by the fact that I hope you will stand in line to get a book from Helen, and that while you're standing in line near the payment table, we might be able to lure you, while you're waiting, to make a donation if you maybe thought you wouldn't make a donation. So do it, come on board, don't be a stranger, and thank you very much for being here.